Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Sivan Hong. She's here to celebrate Benny J and the Horrible Halloween. It's part of her Super Fun Day book series, a series that features neurodiverse characters. Before we invite Sivan into the studio, we would love to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. Also check out our Reading With Your Kids Pinterest page. And we would love to hear from you through our website. It's readingwithyourkids.com. When you go there, you can sign up for our free newsletter, can download a whole lot of great things for you and your kids to do together. And you can also get in touch with us through our contact button. Joining us right now from Westport in Connecticut, our guest today is the author of the Super Fun Day book series. Please welcome to the show, Sivan Hong. Hey, Sivan, how are you?
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Jed.
I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited I was able to say the title of your series correctly this take. So tell us about the series, please.
So the Super Fun Day book series has 3 books so far, and they all focus on having neurodiverse characters. And they are picture books for kids ages 3 to 7. And the books are designed specifically to help neurodiverse kids get through some of their biggest challenges. I illustrate the books as well, and they're designed very simply because some neurodiverse kids can get easily distracted with lots of different things on a page. And so the pictures are really simple. The story is written directly for them. And even the font I use helps kids who may be dyslexic follow along.
You know, one of the things that I've learned here in doing the Reading with Your Kids podcast is that oftentimes, and you brought up kids with dyslexia and more dyslexic-friendly font. I think that's the way you say it. But a lot of times we look at these kids as kids who might have something broken. No one's going to say that, but the kid has a challenge. And reality is, a lot of our language and a lot of the things that we use, they're broken. You know, if there's, you know, I know there's certain fonts out there that I can't read for the life. You know, there's no way. I put my glasses on, I still don't know what it is. So I think it's important for us to kind of change the way we look at kids and not look at kids as, oh, this kid has an issue. It's like, well, maybe it's our language and the fact that, you know, the English language, we use 26 letters, but those 26 letters represent 40-something different sounds. Do you think we could add some letters? Maybe that could help.
I love this point because the whole concept of neurodiversity for kids is an idea that says brains are all different. And that kind of diversity is good. Mm-hmm. It's biologically necessary for humanity. And just because my brain works differently than your brain works, it doesn't mean it's a deficit. It's not a disability. It's just a difference. And having people who think differently, that's what helps us kind of in society get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a positive thing.
Absolutely, yeah. If my body was made up of, 35 right hands, I'd be pretty useless.
You would, but somebody who is selling rings may find you to be a very good customer.
Okay. Well, I don't wear rings, so that they wouldn't like me. But I get your point. So talk to us about, one of the things that, I've heard, and I've said it myself, is that, wow, when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody who was on the autism spectrum. Well, I didn't know anybody who was said to be on the autism spectrum. And then when I got into social work, it was this rare thing that, there are some kids who are in special schools who rock all day long and don't talk to anybody and can't make eye contact. And so there's only a few of those, but now we know that they're there. And now we hear statistics that, maybe 1 in 50 boys fall on somewhere on the autism spectrum. And, and people are saying, wow, what's happening? Why do we have so many more kids on the spectrum? And I think the correct answer is we just didn't recognize it. They've always been there. I look back at my childhood, and I know a couple of kids who were absolutely on the spectrum. And so, we're just becoming more aware of this.
Absolutely. So I have ADHD. And in the 70s growing up, there was no way they were diagnosing women with ADHD. Like, that just didn't happen. So I went through school and life and everything and was only recently diagnosed after both of my kids were diagnosed being neurodiverse. And so in hindsight, it would have been really helpful. But I think what you see is autism being a spectrum, right? Like, people from our generations view autism as Rain Man, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the person that we think of as autistic, and forget that somebody like Anthony Hopkins, who is said to be autistic, and talks about being diagnosed later on in life, he's also somebody on the spectrum. It is a spectrum. There is no one way to look at it. And so the fact that we are now diagnosing kids younger and younger is hugely helpful, because with the right interventions and the right supports, we can change the trajectory of these kids' lives. We can make them learn how to use their difference in a really positive way.
Yeah. We had one author on the show. Her name was Jessica Dawn, and we were talking about her books. And our conversation took a sharp turn as we're talking about her beautiful books, and she mentioned the fact that, I have ADHD and I'm dyslexic, and I think it's a gift. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's talk about that. Let's dive into that a little bit more. You mentioned that you've been diagnosed with ADHD. Is it something you can look back on and say, it caused me some issues and it was hard at times, but I'm really happy with the way I am because I can do this, this, and this?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a huge gift. And, when both of my kids have ADHD, and when I talk to them about it, I compare it to having a race car brain. It can go really, really fast, and you can win the race with a brain like this. But you need to learn how to take those corners slowly so that you don't drive off the track. And if you can learn how to do that, then you're going to be hugely successful. And so, look, there are things for me that are hard. Reading a book and sitting down and just actually physically reading the book is always a challenge for me. I get distracted. But give me an audiobook and I consume them like nobody's business. And so I've had to learn how to do things differently in order to thrive. It would have been great if I had known this in college. It would have been great if my teachers knew this when I was younger. But I still was able to succeed, and I attribute my creativity to my ADHD. When you look at a lot of the CEOs that are around today, many of them are neurodiverse. The guy who founded JetBlue talks about his neurodiversity. The one who founded Virgin Airlines talks about his neurodiversity. The guy who founded IKEA says that the reason why when you go into IKEA, there are no numbers with any of the furniture is because he's dyslexic and he found it really hard to remember those numbers. So he named all of his furniture names so he could remember it, right? Like, there are plenty of people out there who are incredibly successful with neurodiversity who to this day will attribute that to the reason why they are successful.
Yeah. Now, I know one of the books in your series is called Benny J and the Horrible Halloween, and we're right here in the Halloween season. Can you tell us about this book?
absolutely. This is a true story of my son when he was in kindergarten, and he was dreadfully scared of going to the Halloween parade at school. And I dressed him up in his cute costume, and we get in the car to go to school, and he refused to get out of the car. And as a parent, I was like, Halloween is the best possible holiday, shy of Christmas. You should want to be going to school. You get candy, you dance around in a costume. There's no learning that happens. Like, why are you so scared about this day? And I couldn't get him to go, and he missed it. And as a parent, I felt like a complete failure. What was going on? What was wrong with me? What was wrong with my child? And my eldest son, Benjamin, is an autistic boy, and he has ADHD. And I worked with his team in school to figure out what was going on so that the following year he could enjoy the Halloween parade. And this book walks somebody through all of the reasons why he didn't want to go, all the things that made him nervous, and then gives him the actual tools we used to help him get through and thrive. And now he loves Halloween. But it's structured like a social story, and social stories are used in special education to help kids overcome their challenges. So this is structured like a social story, but it also has a happy ending where social stories just tell you the steps. So it's a teaching tool for parents to help their kids overcome challenges. And it's also a great tool for parents with neurotypical kids to help explain, why is somebody in my classroom wearing headphones? Mm-hmm. Why is somebody in my classroom playing with a fidget toy? Why does somebody in my classroom have a hard time when our schedule changes? It really creates this opportunity for discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked a lot here on the show about books being windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Being being able to let a kid see themselves in the pages of books. And a lot of times when we hear this expression, we're thinking, oh, yeah, kids of color need to see themselves in the pages of books. And that's absolutely true. But kids who are neurodiverse need to be able to see themselves in the pages of books. And kids who are neurotypical need to see their classmates portrayed positively in books. You mentioned, I think it's this social structure. Did I get that term right?
It's called a social story.
A social story. So how does that differ from a typical? You gave me, but give me an example of how it differs.
It differs because it gives you specific steps. So my books all have lists in them. There's a list of all of the reasons why a child may be nervous about something, and it lists them very concretely. It's not something that you have to read between the lines of. Here are all the reasons why I'm afraid of the Halloween parade. And then it will give you a list of steps, or you will watch the character go through all of their fears and succeed, right? So that when you talk about it with your child, you can say, okay, if you're worried that there's going to be a lot of noise in a Halloween parade, we can give you headphones with your costume, and that will make it quieter. Mm-hmm. So that is the solution to the problem. So it's this solution problem kind of setup that makes it different than a typical story. Melanie Meyers, the author who writes the Scary Squirrel books, she puts a lot of lists in her books, and I'm not sure she realizes how effective they are for neurodiverse kids. But that setup is really, really important. It gives them a structure that they can follow along. And structure matters a lot for neurodiverse kids. Yeah.
I had this thought when I was, when you were mentioning the kids with the headphones, because it hurts. Loud noises physically hurt a lot of kids, and some kids have a reaction to touch. And so for a lot of those kids who can't be hugged and, don't like that physical touch, I'm imagining the pandemic was a real relief for them. There was no one hugging them. But I was thinking back to when I was a kid almost 100 years ago, and, the reaction would have been, get over it, suck it up, deal with it. There's no big deal. I'm really happy that we've progressed to the point where we're respecting the fact, this child has different needs, and we can change. The child probably can't change right now, maybe the child can never change, but we can change. We give the kid a pair of headphones, make their life easier.
The analogy I like to give is when you build a ramp for somebody with a wheelchair for a kid to get into school, that ramp doesn't bother anybody else, right? It doesn't impact the other kid's ability to learn or to play or to do anything. And we can't imagine saying, no, we're not going to build a ramp for somebody in a wheelchair so that they can access their education. The same thing is true with a pair of headphones or fidget toys or a chair that moves around. These are all accommodations that allow kids to be in a regular classroom with their peers and learning, and it doesn't get in the way of anybody else's learning.
Yeah. Well, Sivan, I'm actually old enough to remember the time when people did have a problem building a ramp for somebody with a wheelchair.
Yes,
and
it's like, I would hope we're way past that at this point.
I do too. Yes. I mean, and anybody my age, you all remember when the sidewalk cuts came through. It was like, why are we doing this? What, there's one person in a wheelchair in the neighborhood. What? But when we make an accommodation for one person, we're sending a signal not only to that one person, but we're letting the entire community know that we value everyone, that everybody is special. And if we're making an accommodation for a person in a wheelchair and a person who needs headphones because of their sensitivity, then that's a pretty cool thing, because that means I'm living in a neighborhood that's going to be sensitive when I have a need, and they're going to be there to support me when it's my turn to be supported.
Well, and frankly, if you want to be completely cold-hearted about this, if you help these kids when they're young, then they don't become a burden on society when they're older, right? And they do become independent workers who are earning taxes and all the rest of that stuff. But if we ignore these children and ignore those accommodations, then they do become a burden on society. So even if you're not doing it for the right reason, it still makes sense to have an inclusive classroom environment and provide these accommodations for kids.
Yeah. So how did you become such a vocal advocate? I know you have kids and you were an advocate for your kids, which is your job as a parent. But a lot of times, when your own kid gets the help they need, parents just sit down and go, okay, well, I'm glad that's over. I know there's going to be another fight down the road, and let me just rest. You're taking it a step further, and you're creating products and books that are going to help other families. Where did that motivation come from?
There just wasn't enough out there. When my son was little, I couldn't find a book that was a mirror for him that showed him a child wearing headphones. That didn't exist. And maybe it does, but I have never been able to find it. And I didn't want to have another parent have to go through the same battle I had to go through with him when, even in kindergarten, he didn't want to wear the headphones because he didn't want to be different. And so I said, look, I've gone through this. I know the steps that my kids and other kids have gone through to be successful. Let me share this. And I get so many pictures of kids pointing to the page of the Benny J book where he's wearing headphones, and their parents saying, my kid turned this page and said, wow, that's just like me. And then I'm like, okay, this is why I do what I do, because I want to be able to make the lives of other parents easier and the lives of these kids better. Yeah. It's that simple.
Yeah. Earlier on, we talked about a dyslexic-friendly font. And we have a lot of authors who listen to the show. And we're living in a time right now, at some point, in a not too distant past, it would have been an expense to create a book that had create a couple versions of books. If you had a very specific font that you wanted to use and it wasn't dyslexic friendly, then you have to make print a run of these books with that font and then print another run of books with the dyslexic friendly font. We're living in a time right now where an author who is printing on demand can create two versions and make these different versions available. Are there names of can you point an author who's listening to specific fonts that are friendlier for folks with dyslexia?
There's a handful of them. I would just Google dyslexic fonts, and you don't even need to create 2 books. What makes something dyslexic friendly is that there aren't a lot of curly cues, right? That the letters are very clearly articulated. And for authors writing picture books, you want those letters to be clear anyway, because this is the age where the kids are learning to read, and you don't want those letters to be complicated and fancy. You want them to be simple. So I actually think creating books with dyslexic friendly font and creating books that are easy for children to learn to read and follow along are one and the same. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't need to do both. You just need to be aware that if the font is fancy, it's going to be hard for people with dyslexia to follow along.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, look, all of my books are also available on audiobook to make them accessible to all kinds of learners. And what I have found is, today it's not such a hard thing to be able to get your book on an audiobook and to be able to then share it in another format, so that kids who may be still struggling with following along with the words can follow along with your story.
Yeah. And audiobooks are amazing. I love audiobooks, and it's a great thing to pop on in the van or in the car. If you have a choice of something, if you're going to be listening to something on the way to school or on the way to soccer practice, how about a great story instead of whatever questionable song might be playing on the top 40 station?
Look, every morning when we go to school in the car, my kids and I listen to an audiobook, and it's usually a book that's too sophisticated for them to read on their own, but one that touches a specific topic. And it allows me to then have conversations with them about the things that they are learning about in the book in real time. And it's a great way to spend the time. And I find that it means that they don't fight with each other in the back of the car because they're too busy paying attention to this wonderful story.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about, how important it is for kids, neurotypical kids, to see their classmates in the pages of books and have conversations with those kids to let them know that, yes, he is sensitive and that's okay, and we can make accommodations for them. What about your kids who are neurodiverse? Do they understand that they are, that they think in a different way? And how did you help them become okay with that?
So my eldest was diagnosed with autism when he was 2. We probably would have been able to tell at 3 months old that his brain worked differently. And even at that age, we used to refer to it as his special brain, right? And talk to him about the fact that he had a special brain and it was different than my brain, but that was cool and great. And it allowed him to see the world in a different way. And then by the time he hit kindergarten, we started to use the word autistic with him. And we normalized it, right? We didn't make it some scary thing. And he decided at points to tell some of his friends, because we would point to different people who were famous and influential to be like, oh, they think that Einstein was neurotypical and look what he was able to do. And, and Michelangelo, and really share some of these things so that he felt proud about his difference. And my younger son with ADHD, when we talked to him about it, and again, we used that race car analogy with him, he told me, he's like, I'm not going to tell any of my friends I have ADHD. And I stepped back and I was like, no, that's fine. It's totally your choice. He's like, because I don't want to brag. And I was like, okay, well then, I've done my job.
That's awesome.
So that's how it's treated in my house. And it was my boys who told me to go have a neuropsych and get the actual diagnosis, because we always knew that I had ADHD. like very obvious. And so I did, and I got my neuropsych and I showed it to them and we all high-fived and we're like, woohoo, look at us. It really is the sense of them being X-Men, right? That they're different, but the difference is good, right? And I don't expect them to change. I want them to embrace who they are. And obviously, you know, do I want my son to suffer if noises are loud? No, but I want him to feel proud if he's wearing a set of headphones and be like, no, look at all the cool things my brain does. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have supersonic hearing, right? Like, that's how you frame it.
Yeah. Well, that's really great advice for parents out there. You know, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about the Super Fun Day book series, to find out more about Benny J and the Horrible Halloween, and find out more about you. Where can they find you?
My website is sivanhong.com, SIVANHONG. I'm the only Sivan Hong in the world, so it makes it really easy to find me. And the books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and a whole bunch of other places, but you can also get them on my website.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the one and only Sivan Hong in the entire world.
Hey, in the entire world.
Sivan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Really happy and excited to welcome back Paolo Mazzucato. He'll be here to celebrate the absolutely true story of La Befana. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book, please be sure to check out our website, readingwithyourkids.com. If you click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page, you can scroll on down to find out how you can be a guest on the show. You know, being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, it doesn't cost you a thing, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. You can also find out about our really powerful Certified Great Read program. This is a program that's helped loads and loads of authors to let people know that their book is worthy of their consideration. Do you know that there are thousands of books published every single month? No exaggeration. That's true. There are thousands of books published every single month. The Certified Great Read program can really grab the attention of parents and grandparents who are so very, very busy. They want to know that the books that they're buying are going to be fun and enriching for their kids. This is one way to help them know that. Check it out today, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click here, scroll on down to Certified Great Reads. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, the author of the Super Fun Day book series, Sivan Hong. I also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.